Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is Raven Keefer. Before I bring him on, I want to remind you to subscribe to Forbidden Knowledge News on lbry.tv, which is now Odyssey. We're also available on all popular podcast platforms. And for sure, check us out on Rokfin. Rokfin's where you get all of our premium content, and you can get all our regular shows for free. You get all the premium content from all the content creators on Rokfin. Just click the link in the description or visit rokfin.com/FKN+. Also, check out the amazing products at Ascent Nutrition. They're from the same fine folks at EMF Harmonized. I've been using their Peak Liver Support. It supports liver detoxification, and it's full of free radical scavengers. Also, I've been using their Nootropic Focus. It supports brain health and concentration, helps with memory and recall. They have some of the highest quality supplements available, and they even have organically grown mold and mycotoxin-free coffee. Just click the link in the description to check out what they have to offer. Also, if you'd like to make a donation, it is greatly appreciated. It helps us to be able to bring you amazing guests 5 nights a week or more. And you guys may have noticed a dwindling presence here on YouTube. YouTube has become the most disgusting platform in existence, and we want to get you guys onto one of our other completely free platforms, like Rokfin. Yes, you can get all our content free on Rokfin, on Odyssey, and of course all the podcast platforms. We're almost completely shadow banned on YouTube anyway. It's getting worse by the day. I'm actually surprised we're still on here at all. I've been under some BS warning over my content for over a year, which restricts my reach, and it appears to be staying there for good. So all you have to do is just put a different web address in your browser to check out Forbidden Knowledge News. It is that easy, and all those links are also in the description. Tonight I want to welcome Raven Keefer. He is a researcher and contributor to both Wikipedia and indie media at their start, and an expose writer from mid-1980s through today. He has 2 master's degrees, a doctorate in religious studies, bachelor degree in humanities with emphasis on sociology and psychology, and several associate's degrees in various fields. He currently has 23 books in print and has been a lifetime researcher that contributes to numerous YouTube channels, content creators, and independent reporters. Raven, welcome.
I appreciate that. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. I've been looking forward to tonight. I know you've actually been a long-time listener to the show, and you have a very fascinating background, and it gives you, I'm sure, unique insights into many of the topics that I discuss here on my own show. Tonight, I'd like to
Yes.
dive into as many rabbit holes as we can, and get into some of those topics. And I'd love to hear your insights for what we're going to be talking about tonight. First, you do, like I said, you have a very interesting background. I'd love to hear about a little bit more about that and kind of what got you started down your current path.
You know, I'm a lot older, so I'm a generation, almost 2 generations ahead of you. What got me started is I found this weird book in the old Carnegie Library where I lived that was Chariots of the Gods. So like a lot of people my age, Eric von Doniget is the one that got us questioning things. And that is the primary source for all the research that I've done for 40 years.
Yeah, that's an excellent source, though. I mean, that's a great place to start. Now, based on some of the topics that I cover and some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight, have you had any experiences in your life that you can't explain? Any paranormal, UFO sightings, anything like that?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you've gotten into that subject, but there have been so many strange things that I have come across in travels, and sitting here at my house, even that that old saying, "Life is stranger than fiction." I believe it applies universally. As far as UFO goes, the first time I saw one of the giant triangles was in 1995. There's a huge sighting that went from Illinois up through Wisconsin and Michigan, And I happened to be kind of like in the middle of it. I was in Wisconsin at the time, and we were outside, and this thing went overhead at about treetop level, maybe a little bit taller. You got to understand where I was at. The trees were probably 80 or 90 feet, and it was probably maybe twice that in height. Went over silently, had blue lights like a power source. It didn't make any noise. And if you were on a bicycle, you probably could have kept up with it for a while. So these triangle sightings, they're not new.
You think those triangles are ours?
I've always thought that technology was human. And the reason why I say this is because back to what we were talking about a minute ago, Joe Farrell with the research that was done in Germany during World War II. It's not new technology. You can go back to East India and the Vimanas that they write about were flying vehicles the size of cities. I think the trick has been somehow preventing us from being able to see it. I honestly think it's more about interdimensional or outside of our ability to see. Our visual, I've heard you mention this on another show, but our visual spectra is so small. Our ability to hear is so limited. All of our senses are locked into this really, really finite zone. Literally, somebody could be standing next to me right now and listening to me. And if their vibration level was just a little bit higher or lower than mine, I wouldn't be able to see them.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where I fall into with these things that we see in the sky. Like I've seen the Merkaba. I actually videotaped one and sent it to a friend of mine that does YouTube videos, and he put it up. But those things are being seen all around the planet right now. It looks like a star until you zoom in on it, and then it looks like a spinning Merkaba. What it is, there's that thing, the difference between seeing and being able to describe what it is and knowing what it is.
And I don't know if you've seen the show with one of my recent guests. I'm trying to think of his name right now, which it is escaping me. But he takes infrared pictures of the sky, and I believe he's based in the UK. His name is escaping
Yes,
me right now.
I saw that show.
Yes, and he's taking pictures of all kinds of things. It looks like fish in the sky,
Yes.
just insane things that may be there existing in the sky at all times, and we just can't see them. So that's very interesting.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a short story. And this was when we were redeveloping airplanes. And I say redeveloping because you can go back and look at old photographs, or not photographs, but drawings, and some very old text, including Chinese, and you can see aircraft. The people talk about the carvings that are in the Egyptian, but you can see the same carvings in South America, India, China. So we've flown before. The cataclysms reset us, and it's taken us. But I think there's somebody out there that didn't lose their technology. So you look in infrared. We can't see in infrared without help, and even then, it's limited. I think they've been around us all along. And if you go to the tribal traditions like I do, they say that these people walk around us all the time, whether it be Bigfoot or little people. Over in Europe, they got gnomes and fairies and fae folk. Here we call them ushti, which literally means little people. You'll see a little twinkle go by you, and they say, "Oh, that was an ushti." I think they move at a speed or in a spectrum that we just can't see visually. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense, and I would have to agree with that. And you mentioned how this has been seen throughout ancient times, and we probably had the ability to fly and possibly traverse the stars in ancient times. I want to talk a little bit about our history and basically the rewriting of it. For those that really doubt our history has been rewritten, all they have to do is look at what's happening right now. Our
Exactly.
history is being rewritten and destroyed as we speak. I mean, will the next
Well,
generation know about Looney Tunes or Muppets or any book that's been published that doesn't fit the narrative? It's like
Yeah. Well, we've already started experiencing Fahrenheit 451 in different stages. In Germany, they burnt books. Pol Pot burnt books. Mao burnt books. In Texas, they burnt books in the 1990s. Rewriting history is, according to one, I can't remember which Rockefeller said it, but rewriting history is a simple matter of convincing two generations that the past didn't exist. And if you think about that, you look at what's being, a very good example is U.S. textbooks. You won't see it on a reservation, but the Board of Education in a couple of places have actually put in textbooks that the Eastern Native Americans moved west to make room for settlers. They fail to mention that it was at gunpoint and forcibly. Now imagine 2 generations or 3 generations reading that. How long does it take to erase travesties?
Yeah. And when it comes to I guess one of the most profound history erasing events that's been documented, would you say it would surround the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD?
Absolutely. Well, you have different groups working here. We have to go back a little bit further. You know about Göbekli Tepe.
Yes.
And we know that was somewhere around 12,600 years ago.
Right.
And then we had another reset, and I point to the calendars used by the Hebrews that say 5780, 5800, and that's an estimate. So something happened at 6,000 years ago, and you've had other guests on that talk about the cataclysmic cycles that we go through.
Yes.
Is it a true reset? I don't know exactly. 12,600 years ago, the population of the world was dropped down to barely surviving. And somehow they knew beforehand to dig the cities that were underneath the ground, held 50 and 100,000 people. And in Europe, they had tunnels that literally went underneath the ground, and all that stuff was hidden. Thankfully, we have people like Brian Forrester and Matthew LaCroix and others that are digging this stuff back out again. But how easy was it for him to hide all that? And these are things that we're just now discovering, thank goodness.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to some of the knowledge that we had in our ancient past, there's, plenty of different theories and arguments about where this came from. I mean, did it come from ancient aliens that, gave us genetic upgrades? Was it from eating a psychedelic mushroom that gave us, some kind of advanced knowledge? Was it a spiritual contact? There's all kinds of possibilities when it comes to that. I'd like to get your thoughts on where do you think our ancient knowledge came from, because we don't have that anymore. We can't even recreate, the megaliths that we used to do. It seems like we're actually stupider now.
Well, I mean, if you look at the chemicals and the things that are being put into our food and the air and the water and what have you, we probably have lost quite a bit of intelligence. I hate to say that. I imagine that the smartest amongst us are woefully inadequate compared to those that came before. I mean, if they had vimanas and were flying around, there's something that we lost, and it seemed to be intentional. Was it an alien that came here? If you look at the Anunnaki stories and things like that, I have to look at the source as much as I look at the information. We have the same people that are in charge, that have been in charge for at least 6,000 years, and they haven't been truthful about anything. Now, these are the same people that set up our academic institutions, our educational systems, and our oligarchs, whether it be as in monarchies or religious. These people set these things up. And it seems like they set them up very recently, as in maybe 8 or 1200 AD. It doesn't mean that they didn't exist prior to that. It just, what we're dealing with is not that old, maybe 600 or 800 years. So everything before that, unless we can find definitive answers to it, and we do find some in China, and we do find some in India, the Aboriginals in Australia, the Zulu in Africa. We have to be careful because information is not the same thing as knowledge.
Yes, 100%. Now, you mentioned that the people that had basically rewrote history and are still the ones kind of running things today. Now,
well, they've managed to hide themselves in history pretty well.
Right.
Have you ever heard of the Gnostians? And I'm not talking about the Gnostics. No. Gnostians. It's Knossians. They're from a little island in the Mediterranean now, but they were a global, I mean, absolutely a global trading force for a very long time. It seems somehow that they survived the cataclysm 6,000 years ago, and in the 1200s to regain more power. These would be your source for the Gnostic teachings, I would say, because they truly believe that we're in a matrix and the only way out is to destroy it.
Huh.
And I'm sure you've heard other people talk about the nihilists.
Yes.
But the Nosians come from an island and you can't miss it. I'm not going to pinpoint them, but if anybody wants to look, there's a little place called Pente, Pente, and that means dragon, by the way, or Draco. Are these the archons that we're talking about? There have been images of these people that are like 7 and 8 feet tall.
Yeah, and I've always thought that the ones that are really running the show we're not going to know about. You're not going to hear about them on even the deepest conspiracy, talk show or researcher isn't going to really know exactly who these people are. So I find it interesting that you mentioned these Notians.
Notions, yes. And the reason why I got to that is there's a lot of different places, but one of them is Herodotus. Herodotus wrote about the Nocians inserting themselves in every empire, from Egypt, Babylon, Persian, Greek, Roman. He actually wrote and said that these people inserted themselves in places of power within the empires, building one while destroying the other. And if you look at our history, just what we know, let's just forget about what we believe, because that lie in the middle will get you in trouble. Look at what we know. We know that every empire that's been built has been built off the back of the previous empire. Whether you go to the English, the French, the Portuguese, the Romans, the Greeks, the Persians, each one was a step. They used the last one to build up the next one and then destroy the old one. And if you look at the United States today, which is going to really make people mad, they've done the same thing here. They used the United States to destroy the English empire. They created the American empire in the United States, used our military and our strength and our intelligence. And now what are they doing? We're not going to say that find Dinah where location, but most people will pick up what that means.
Right.
But these people have been around for a long, long time. And interestingly enough, the Nocians are a female-driven society. Women are the ones that are in charge. And if you marry outside of their group, then you are no longer an immediate part of their group. You follow through history, and every male who has become anything has had a very odd connection to a wife or a woman. I don't care if it's our favorite philanthropist of modern times.
Right.
I'm going to be careful not to say the names, but we'll just say they created a lot of foundations and groups. And you can go back to the 1800s, and those same families have been interconnected with the families that were once in Europe, but they're connected through the females, not the males.
That is really interesting. Yeah, I've never heard anything about that. Now, there's a lot of occult practices that surround the elites, supposedly, and it's very vague, and it's kind of hard to tell what exactly these occult practices are. Of course, according to some of the modern researchers, it's all Satanism. I think it goes back much older than that. But my question is really these people at the top levels, like these Notians, or maybe right below them when you look at the faces that we hear about, Rockefellers, Rothschilds. Do you think that they are involved in these occult practices and they believe in this stuff?
If you look at what we have historically, we know that a lot of these oligarchs, let's just call them that, I don't like to say elites because there's nothing elite about them.
Yeah, you're right.
They might have money, they might have wealth, they might have access to knowledge because they've hidden it. Well, if you have to hide it to protect yourself, then you're not an elite. You might be an oligarch. But if you look at their practices over time, I mean, We had the early ones right out of Persia that took blood baths using virgins. They've incorporated cannibalism and blood drinking in their religious rituals. Children vanish anytime these people are. We have pedophilia. We have. Let's just. Marquis de Sade was not as evil as some of these people are in their practices sexually. I think a lot of it is to muddy things. If you're looking here, then you're not looking there. But their practices are psychopathic. If you have no concern whatsoever for fellow humans, as long as you're stuck in one of these bodies, then you definitely are a psychopath.
Right. And the highest level of like debauchery, or even I guess you could say drug use for these elites is children, right? Is trafficking and sacrifice or whatever else they're doing with children, right?
Sexual abuse.
Yes.
You get into this. I don't want to say it's a cult, although they do try to hide it. That word is misused a lot. You look at the different sacrificial practices that they've created over time as control for people. We sacrifice our energy and our money to the oligarchs one way or the other, whether it be taxes or tithes. And somehow they've convinced people it's okay to give up your well-being for theirs. The worship of Baal, they used to take and build a fire and stick infants in the flame. That's not changed over time. Did it come from the Gnostians? It seems to me like it's a way of manipulating the population. As you think you are. If you look today, we have one of the greatest sacrificial things ever in the history of mankind, as far as I'm concerned. If you look at these, and I don't even know how people are going to take it, but if you look at these abortion clinics, that is child sacrifice on a scale never seen before.
Right, I agree.
Now, I believe in the right not to be pregnant. I think women should be able to prevent pregnancy, but I do not think that is the means to do it.
Right.
And people get mad at me for saying that, but they have been convinced that that's okay. And to me, that is sacrifice of a caliber that's never been seen in the history of mankind.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And I've always thought that, if you're going to worship a God that requires, first of all, worship that requires you to worship them, and let alone sacrifice something to him, I've just never felt okay with that. I've never felt that this is something you should be worshiping or calling a God or giving your power to,
No, absolutely. And, interestingly enough, these oligarchs that we were just speaking of are the ones that created these organizations that do this.
Yeah.
There's a connection there somewhere, right?